as the foundation for sustainable, data-driven business models. And what do I actually mean by that? Well, AI will become as electricity. We will be not mentioning AI as a component. It will be a natural part of any business model. At the moment, we see business models on acid polluting. So if you think about a business model, well, you come down, you cut costs due to AI being so effective and reducing all the spill in the value chain. And on the other side, you'll get revenues and due to really tailored and vertical client relationships. At the same time as this is happening, we are experiencing a new type of pollution. And this pollution is discrimination, privacy intrusion, lost autonomy, social exclusion, harm to safety, and also disinformation and fake news. These are actually violating our human rights. So this is a pollution, a negative externalities that business models will have to take accountability for. There are three forces driving that we have to learn to report ethical AI performance. Number one, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, often called as sustainability. We know that the financial performance on ESG companies are performing above average. We also have the EU regulation on AI coming up, and this will be an important topic on our discussion today. But also we have the social concern, the patient, the citizen, the customer, the client's need to understand what we're giving away and what we're actually getting in return. So I am so proud to present this agenda for today. We will start with Jörgen. You'll be talking about your work at the Parliament. Your topic is about innovation and competitiveness, and this is so important. I'm also proud to be your advisor. You're also on the committee, the AI committee. You'll talk about a couple of minutes on that work. I will come back and talk about how the upcoming EU regulation actually can be a awakening force for better reporting, for example, to ESG investing. And then I am extremely thrilled to introduce Olivia Gambelin, who is the CEO and founder of Ethical Intelligence. I've followed and admired Olivia's work for a long time, and she's actually preparing, well, both US and European scale-ups to have sustainable business model and do not to pollute the digital environment. Also, we have Giovanni Leoni. Giovanni is you are the lead and head of data and AI ethics at IKEA range. You will talk about your experience from working with AI Sustainability Center's framework on ethical AI when you were in Malmö Stad, but also talk about your new role in at IKEA. And then we'll have the panel discussion, and I really hope to get you all audience awake to write in your questions, and because after that we will have answering your questions or commenting them, and then we'll just have a summary from me, and we'll wrap up and wish you a good day, a good morning, or good afternoon, or good night. All right, so Jörgen.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. It is a pleasure to be here together with you all, and it will be a very interesting roundtable, I think. So my name is Jörgen Warborn. I'm a Swedish member of the European Parliament. I've been here for about 2.5 years, since the last election. And I work mainly with issues relating to industry, to trade, to competitiveness, to bureaucracy, or really fighting bureaucracy to increase competitiveness. And among other things, I'm in the Committee of Artificial Intelligence here in the European Parliament. This is a committee that will be around for additional like 3-4 months, something. We have been working for almost a bit over a year. And our job in this committee is to draft a report that will take a long-term stance on issues like AI. And I think it is very good that we have a designated AI committee in the European Parliament. It means that we can set an ambitious goal, and also that we will have some milestones to follow up with an action plan to follow up. And that we as parliamentarians, we really need to go into depth about the technology that will really boost our competitiveness and solve so many other issues in society. So that is one process that's going on in the Parliament, and it is once again the long-term process. And then we have another process in the Parliament as well, and that is the AI Act. That is the legislation, and that is a proposal that is already on the table and that we are start working with now in the upcoming weeks and months ahead of us. That will be the legislation, and I know, Anna, you will be speaking about that a bit later. So there is 2 important parts here, and I'd like to put this in a context, more in a global context maybe, because I think there are 3 powers here that really counts. It is US, it is Europe, and it is China. And let me start with China, because I think it is quite problematic, of course, with China and the way they are heading. If you simplify things, in Europe, we think of data as something for the individual. It is my data, and I share it with companies and organizations. In US, they tend to view data more as a business resource, a raw material to create business. And in China, data is, of course, a matter of the state. It is the government, or the Communist Party, in fact, that owns the data. That is the view, the different views on data. And data, of course, is the rocket that will, the fuel that will lift the AI rocket. So the Chinese way of looking at data is absolutely not the ethical way. It is the way of an authoritarian state. And I am absolutely convinced that we have to join forces with the US. We as Europeans, we have to join forces with the US in order to create a common understanding of how we should address data and ethical data, because that is the way forward for our competitiveness in the long run. Because if it is not EU and if it is not the US that sets the standards for how to use AI and how to use data, it is someone else. And I do not like that to be China. Therefore, it is so important that we join forces with the US. This is the issues that we discuss in our committee in the European Parliament, but this is also discussions that we have in the quite newly founded Trade and Tech Council between EU and the US. They have a number of working groups that relate just to trade and tech, and one of the working groups is addressing the issues on artificial intelligence. And I think that is a very good sign that we on both sides of the Atlantic, that we would like to work more closer together with these issues. some of the issues that we discuss in the Parliament relating to ethical data is, of course, how we could use the data, or if the machine should be able to make decisions or not. And I think the best solutions is, of course, if the machine and the man work together, man and machine. There, I think we have the best solutions. I also think, of course, we have the issue of biases that is also very often addressed when it comes to artificial intelligence. And yes, there is a problem with biases. We have to address that problem. But of course, we have biases in society as a whole. And discrimination, it should be forbidden in a normal life, as it should be with new technologies such as artificial intelligence. So we could actually use artificial intelligence to help us make good decisions in the future. These are some of the important discussions that we will have in front of us in the European Parliament, and I look very much forward to this roundtable to listen to Giovanni and Olivia and Anna. I'm especially very happy to have Anna in my advisory board. Because these issues are, I'm a politician, I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence. I have a bit of a clue, and with the help of Anna, I have learned quite a lot during the past couple of months, and I expect to learn even a bit more during this coming session together. So thank you very much, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words. I will assure you that you will have voices and the most intelligent minds from businesses when Olivia and Giovanni will give their short presentations. I will just stay a couple of minutes on the AI Sustainability Center's ethical AI governance platform. We use it as an organizational orchestration for AI, and we offer tools to screen, assess, audit, and mitigate ethical risks in AI applications. And how we do this is that we activate cross-functional teams to govern AI. We dismantle ethical considerations and trade-offs in AI models. And also, we have AI ethical performance reports and matrices. And why this is an important factor in the toolkit that we offer is that we see those driving forces of companies wanting faster market acceptance. We need to fully embrace AI. We need to get market acceptance faster by having these cross-functional teams validating the business context, the legal landscape, and also the acceptance on a social and ethical, from a social and ethical context. The other way that we think about EU reporting, not just to gain trust to your clients and gain competitive power, is that we also see that we have, as a macroeconomist, I know we have had a low rate environment for a long time, a lot of money being allocated, and we have to have special vetting tools to get it right, to have responsible scaling. And a very common and increased combination of letters is the ESG, is the environmental, social, and governance reporting. And this is actually going to be a navigation for sustainable business model going forward, and a guide on how to actually know that we're allocating finances into sustainable business, not polluting and violating the human rights, but also comply to upcoming EU regulation. And EU regulation on AI is going to probably come into force early 2024. It's going to ban some of the AIs that is manipulating and capitalizing vulnerabilities, social scoring, for example, but it will also require risk assessment in high stakes AI. For number one, the AI that the Commission has defined have a wide range from statistical models, hard-coded software, and all the way to deep learning. So these high stakes, they are AI applications. They are it's kind of a large part of our economy. It's financials, finance sector, health, public agency, education, recruitment, employment. It goes a long way. So you have to activate your organizations to govern and detect what is high risks. These has to be governed by a robust reporting and explainability. The lower phase of kind of the pyramid that was described when announcing this regulation is where you have low stakes AI. That could be a chatbot. But if you have AI, you have to be transparent about it. So you have to say, hey, you're talking to, or you're communicating with a chatbot at the moment. They also encourage these low stakes to have a code of conduct. Just a remark on that, we know that chatbots can become racial in a few seconds. We experience that. So going to regulate AI from the AI Sustainability Center's framework of doing it, I mean, you can be compliant to upcoming regulation, but there will still be business risks. Nonetheless, this EU regulation will awake the organization to have tools to actually know and guide their AI in a way that is true to their organizational values and principles. There are critics to this EU regulation that it might hamper innovation and growth, and it's disproportionately hitting small and medium-sized companies. At the AI Sustainability Center, we see this regulation as a way of knowing what guardrails and how you are to navigate in this world and how you can create sustainable business models. So we see that this is a strength and actually a tool for scale-ups. But more of that from Olivia. What I wanted to talk about lastly is ESG and how we can lead the way in European ESG companies to actually have a way to report the S and the G. And finally, when it comes to social concern, I think, Jörgen, you mentioned the US, the EU and China, like 3 blocks. And I think that the EU is we are best suited to innovate responsibly. And I can also say how we work at the center is that, well, some of our clients from the US, they really want to be ahead of the regulatory curve, of the EU regulatory curve. We didn't think that would happen when GDPR was launched. We thought that that would be a way for well, that was the Trump administration. But we're entering an arena where the US is actually looking at EU regulation in order to act and be competitive here, but also for in their own markets. Okay, so this is the time when I'm going to introduce Olivia. Olivia, you're going to talk about your ethical intelligence and how you work with scale-ups, ethical AI by design. I think that's beautifully put. And also, I want to hear about the success cases that you have all around the world.
Thank you so much, Anna. And thank you so much for having me here today. I was incredibly excited for this invite. Anna and I have had many a conversation where we sit down and we go, oh, well, this is so exciting for both of us because we're tackling the same problem from different directions. So as Anna was saying, I work primarily with startups, SME scale-ups, the smaller size companies, whereas Anna's coming with Sustainability Center from the large enterprise side. And so a lot of what we're doing is looking to make sure that our efforts connect, that we're not developing from one end methodologies and practices for startups and scale-ups that don't match up with enterprise, especially as we're seeing this is becoming incredibly important as we get into more procurement and mergers and acquisitions, because what happens is a larger enterprise will look to buy a software from a small startup or scale-up. And if that startup or scale-up has compromised technology or technology that doesn't align with the values or even the risk indicators of a large enterprise, that deal won't go through. So this is incredibly important to be able to approach this not issue, not problem, but challenge from both angles. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about ethical intelligence, the work that we do there, but I want to focus quickly right at the beginning here on our motto, which is bringing the human back into the equation. So we default towards human intelligence. And what I mean by that is we approach every situation, not anti-technology, we're actually very pro-technology, but we are pro-human reasoning at the first and at the heart of it. So what we're doing is we're looking at the technology going, is this a problem that needs to be solved by technology, or is this a problem that needs to be solved by the people behind the scenes? So it's a bit of a different approach, but it's something that we quite believe in. And it's important to have that wealth of perspective coming from the back end as well. So let's see, I hope the slide switches. If not, you're stuck looking at our great logo. There we go. So one of the services that we provide is something called ethics as a service. And now I can't claim this actual phrase. Ethics as a service was first coined by Jessica Mori out of Digital Catapult in the UK. They did some fantastic work there where they were essentially running ethics boards with startups and scale-ups. And they sat down and went, what do we actually call this work that we do? And said, well, really, truly, it's ethics as a service. That was actually just coined back in February 2021. So this is still a very, very new term. And it's still a very, very new industry, the AI ethics industry in general. So things are still forming as we go. But ethics as a service is very important because it captures a lot of the essence of the work that needs to be done for startups and scale-ups. And what I'm going to say here is with startups and scale-ups, they don't have the time or the resources or the ability to go down to the strict, we'll say, guidelines of you must do it like this, you must do it like this, you must do it like this. They need the guidance in the moment, the flexibility to actually have access to the expertise of people that specialize in this space and be able to consult with them. And it's almost like an advisory board of being able to say, we're stuck on this problem. We're stuck on the understanding of what is fairness. Can you help us what that means in our industry and our culture as well? A lot of the work that we're doing is when we go in to work with a client, it's just breaking down within the team a definition. Because oftentimes teams have different definitions of, say, fairness, and that results in different implications for what's going into the technology. So just having straight definitions within teams is incredibly useful for these startups and scale-ups. And again, is part of ethics as a service, which is really just means getting that expertise that is growing into the workplace, into the ground force that's happening. Another aspect of ethics as a service that I want to stress that Anna was already talking about is the risk mitigation versus innovation aspect. A lot of times startups and scale-ups have this fear of, well, ethics is going to slow us down. Any type of these regulations are going to slow us down. There's going to be that hindrance to innovation. And it's all about risk mitigation. And risk mitigation is very important. That is a very important aspect of ethics. The interesting thing there, though, is it's not as applicable to startups because a lot of the risk mitigation techniques that we have are very retrospective. They are trying to fix problems that have happened. They are trying to retrospectively go, oh, we messed up, let's figure out how to fix it, or we forgot to implement this at the very beginning. The great opportunity that exists with startups and scale-ups is actually looking at more of the innovation side and building from the ground up those ethical design elements. So instead of going backwards to fix something, say you forgot to run certain fairness metrics, or you are missing certain privacy aspects, or you've misapplied consent. That's a typical one. Instead of having to go backwards to fix that, the startups and scale-ups are in a great position to actually be able to proactively place that in already. And so what we do in terms of innovation, and especially with these companies, is looking at the end goal, which is determined by regulations such as the one coming out of the EU, that really is the strictest one that we abide by. And that is, I don't want to say the golden rule, but it is the one where if you're not compliant with the EU regulations, there's really nothing you can do. You can't expand, and the European market is a very attractive market to expand into. So working backwards and looking at, well, what do you need to achieve? What do you need to pinpoint? What are the principles? What are the values that need to be embedded into your technology? Looking to pull that from the policies that exist and working backwards to going, well, it seems I keep muting. Day one, we're sitting here with our client and they're going, well, we know we're collecting user data. Okay, great. That means we need to immediately open up GDPR and go, are we putting in the right steps from day one? And that's a very similar case as what's happening now with the new AI regulation and policies coming. But it's, again, that's the more of an innovation approach. What you're looking at is you're proactively tackling these problems. And then even going beyond that, which is something that I really want to stress, is it's also used to help give you that competitive edge. So time after time, I see with clients coming and saying, actually, I can use a case study here. We had a client come to us that said, look, we really want to be able to use our technology to help children. We think that's a great idea. It was a platform that you can make 5-minute phone calls to anyone in the world, anyone in the world. And so you can call, and they had designed it for children to be able to essentially talk to someone about their career or about an idea that they have, really truly inspiring. But in that moment, we looked at it and we went, okay, that's your end goal. How it's currently being designed, though, you first of all have a lot of violations in terms of child protection and data. But there's another way that we can do this. We can look at the end goal of wanting to help children. Well, let's bring this into schools and partner with schools instead. And is there a special feature that you can design that is solely meant for partnering with universities that allow career days, online career days? And so it's that kind of reasoning. When you look at, well, here's the value that we want to achieve. How do we work backwards? What does that look like in terms of a feature? Another thing that I want to talk about now is actually the ethics maturity continuum. And you'll see the text is blurred at the moment. This is in final stages and actually will be published end of this year, beginning of next. This is in partnership with an organization called EAIGG. It's a governance group, ethical AI governance group. It is a combination of multiple different stakeholders. Anna is one of them as well. In full transparency, and it brings together different stakeholders in this space. The very cool thing is it is bringing in a lot of the investor community, we'll say, out in the Silicon Valley. So we're actually seeing a shift in some of technologies in the tech industry to actually paying attention and giving weight to these problems. And one of the members of EAIGG, his name's Anik, and he always says, if you want a successful startup, if you want to reach a Fortune 500 startup, this is not an option. You have to have these elements built into your technology, built into your company. So I just want to bring this up quickly as an example of what some of the work that we've been doing. Again, what this continuum allows us to do is map either an early stage or a late stage startup, depending, again, on size. About seed to Series B is classified as early stage. Series C and beyond is late stage. But essentially look at them and heat map. Go, where are you? Can you answer yes or no to these different categories? And basically from below, meaning you aren't implementing anything in terms of practice, or exemplary, you are going above and beyond. And then in the 5 categories that we've distilled down from, again, drawing on policies such as the one coming out of the EU, such as the one coming out of the UK and the US, trying to give that full picture aspect. But essentially what we're able to do with this continuum as it's being built is look at a startup and go, okay, yes, no to all of these, and then be able to turn around and say, well, here are your hot spots. Here is where you're lacking in development, and here's how we can get you up and moving to the point where this is benefiting. And the great thing here, which is going to tie and wrap everything back up, is, as I was saying before, a lot of the work that Anna and I are doing is from different perspectives, different angles. With ethical intelligence, we are working from the startup up. Anna's working from enterprise down, and we want to make sure those meet. this continuum model is actually built off of research done on the different policies and regulations and practices of large enterprise and government policy. So it's been worked backwards. So essentially, if a startup were to follow this continuum, they would be set up for success as they grow, both from a policy perspective and in terms of what every startup hopes for, a grand exit at the end of the day. So that is all for me for this moment. And thank you so much, Anna. I'm going to hand it back over to you now.
Thank you. We'll have a very interesting discussion after Giovanni's speech. Giovanni, you're going to talk about your experience and your thought leadership within this area in the Nordics. I have had the pleasure of working with you. You are extremely humble to your first mover on this from a municipality perspective, and also now in a large organization. I think you will be the AI ethics thought leader of the year in many awards ceremonies going forward. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. And yes, I don't see myself as a thought leader, but I'm extremely humbled to be part of this conversation today. I think that I'm very happy that these kind of conversations take place, that we leave room for it. And driving organizational, analytical, and business development for the past 2 decades, I've had the fortune to be close to people that are seeing that it's not all about technology. It's not all about bringing out higher efficiency, but it's all about also creating a better and greater impact for a better society. Because in the end, it is not the details of the technology that makes sense, but it's actually how we as humans decide what values we want to steer along the way. We've come to a point, it is not a matter of if we think they're going to be optimized. It's not a matter of if we're going to apply artificial intelligence, but rather that we decide in what shape and form we do that. In the collaboration that I've done in the municipal context, I had a fortune to really go deep in and see how we could create a better context for the many citizens, but also see how we can steer that in a way that it always preserves the integrity of the individual. Then going further in collaboration with UNICEF and seeing pilot casing of the AI policy for children is going beyond the necessity of really securing what it is to create artificial intelligence for those that are most vulnerable. And now I'm fortunate enough to not only being able to contribute to development on a broader scale, but actually in a context of IKEA. And I think that it boils down to really whatever organization you're in, whether that being public or private, is to see it's not about applying a mechanical way of making that AI ticks the boxes. It is rooting yourself in values that you stand for, and see that perpetuates throughout how we apply the technology. It is seeing through that it's not a matter of that we only design it to do the right thing, but actually also that we monitor how it is impacting the surrounding society and its individuals. It's setting the stage that it's not about silos, that on one side of the company, someone within technology is designing something, and another side of the company, someone is working with communication or values, but actually that we work together. We work together within our organization cross-functionally and see how we can continuously design our business processes, how we can really monitor the impact of them, that we can see that it's all along the process of designing advanced algorithms, that we do so with a consciousness that is both about being conscious of what biases we possibly put in by choosing of data or algorithms, but also that we see to what impact it has on its society. So for me, it's all a matter of being more conscious of what we're doing, Also seeing that we not only create it as paper product, whether that being on a policy level or on an organizational level, but actually that we see that we are actively working to design our processes in a way that it has a higher chance of contributing good. Both contributing good in terms of competitiveness. Of course, we should always strive for effectiveness, no matter what organization we're in. It should also create an impact of good in the society where it stands. And I think that this is a line of thought that we've seen for the last couple of years in terms of planetary effects within sustainability, where we want to see a positive impact on our planet. But taking the full scope of also seeing the full impact of the social sustainability impact of people, and seeing that we go through the whole perspective of how we utilize technology for good, is something that is about, it's just a matter of maturity. And it's not about creating hurdles. It's not about creating hinders, but actually designing things and processes so we create an output that is positive. And we will learn. I think it's a matter of, that's the reason why it's so positive with these kind of conversations, is that we need to learn from each other. We need to find good examples and find them in a way that we can design things for good. It's not about setting hindrance in terms of legislation, but creating a play field that we know how we can in the best way move faster forward, how we can innovate within the realms of certainty, but also create an understanding how we can learn from each other in creating better solutions and services. And I think in the end, as we're striving for a better world, a better society, I think it builds on the fact that we want to build trust. In a time where we feel challenged by the information around us, if we can build trust all the way from in a public or a private context towards our citizens and consumers and customers, we can build a trust also for that we're utilizing technology for good. So I'm happy to be part of this conversation. I can speak for hours on this topic. So I'll leave it back to you, Anna, so we can have a dialogue going.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. And you also know, when I founded the Center 2018, my vision was that every yearly report should have an updated CSR with how you achieve your AI sustainability goals. So in a couple of years, or even maybe earlier than that, we'll see. But I'm comfortable with you in your position that you will lead the way here. So now we will have the discussion, the round table. Unfortunately, we will not be in a physical round table, but thanks to your really great and fantastic sharing your experience, I think we've learned how to find a good creative mood in these digital roundtables. I want to start with something that Jörgen mentioned, that the EU and the US should come together on this, and I think that is beautiful, and it's such a good strategy. I want to loop in Olivia, because I think in the EU, I think we have a sense that we're actually on this earlier. But can you brief us on your sense of where European companies or scale-ups and investors are versus the US investors and scale-ups?
Absolutely. And so I'm speaking from the perspective of being in the EU these past few years, and now currently today sitting in California. So quite literally physically moving from both places and seeing this from the ground up. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing is the conversation here in the Silicon Valley in California, but in the US, is finally starting to shift. The EU was much more adaptive and much more accepting of the topic of ethics, of the topic of AI ethics. It was of course, we have this policy, of course, this is coming, of course, this is needed. It's taken the US quite a bit longer to actually come around and say, yes, we do agree. This is a space that needs to be regulated. So really the US, the conversation here is where the conversation was in Europe probably about 2 to 3 years ago. However, the US moves a lot quicker. So the conversation here now as well, and also because the EU, they're following, it's moving at a quite quicker speed. And as I was mentioning as well, investors and startups here on the ground in Silicon Valley are starting to catch on to this. And this is becoming a common topic of conversation, but also a common action point that we're now seeing and a selling point.
Jörgen, do you want to comment?
Yes, that was very interesting thoughts from Olivia, but I'm not really sure that US is ready to regulate. When I was in Washington for, I think it was a month ago or something, and I talked to a lot of stakeholders. I had meetings at different departments, at the White House, and at a lot of different levels. And my impression is that there won't be a regulation on AI in the US in the coming years. There will be standard settings, but not regulations, not decisions, not legislations, either from the president or from the Congress.
It doesn't need to be regulation. You and me, we have had discussions on regulation, but there are different ways to achieve validation of ethical AI, right?
I think you're absolutely right there, and I think I think the American way is probably a very good way, because it is partly self-regulation and it's partly standard settings, and it is a bottom-up process when the US sets standards. And I think we can learn a lot from that in Europe as well. And just as Olivia said before, if we can join forces between EU and US, I think that is the strongest position for both of us. And for all businesses, startups as scale-ups and big industries and whatever you have it in both in the US and EU.
To your point, Jörgen, the perspective that I was speaking from is more people out of the tech industry themselves and the market here. In general, there is the fear of unregulated technology here for the community itself, for society. And I can't speak for the politicians, which you know much better, which is quite interesting to see that there is that conflict. It's quite interesting to see that from the US political side, there isn't that move towards any type of regulation, whereas as a society, there's a fear and actually want of regulation, or at least something where the users feel they have agency back over their technology. There's that gap occurring right now.
So that's extremely interesting. I'm going to turn over to Giovanni. I was on a panel with large electricity and transportation companies earlier today, and the topic was only AI governance. And my question to you, because the Swedish or Nordic approach to businesses is that we have low hierarchy, we have more democratic processes, and we have more transparent organizations, and we combine values with sustainable business model. Would you say that coming and representing the IKEA as one of our companies that are global and that has been in the market for a very, very long time, would you say that, and you are very value-driven in your organization, not you as Giovanni, I know you are, whatever organization you will be, but IKEA, would you say that there's an advantage, the Nordic and Swedish governance and organizational culture to do AI in a more ethical and sustainable way?
I think there is a line of thought there that I could agree upon, and I think that is connected to two things. And I would say that leaning back on the history we have within IKEA in terms of sustainability, with a focus upon the planetary parts, but also social sustainability. It's about transparency, to feel proud of doing good, to feel responsibility and accountability upon it, and to be able to be open when there is challenges, and also being very honest in taking accountability and driving that forward. So I would say that there is a strain of thought there within IKEA that can also be recognized in the Nordic countries is an ambition for higher transparency. And also to see the opportunities that are with technology, because we have a history of not only IKEA, but many other companies within the Nordic region that are very progressive in terms of technology. But what I would say that one thing that we need to keep in mind that is a very good learning, not only from an IKEA context, but also from a Nordic point of view, is to be very human-centric. To see that artificial intelligence is a technology area that is developing rapidly. We cannot go into the nitty-gritty details. We cannot go into the details of how to regulate this technology, but rather having a shift upon and a focus upon the human impact, the human effects, is something that is key. Because if we have a line of thought where we wish the impact to be, the effect to be, and see that we have a straight line of thought of seeing that we monitor that and see the impact of it, we can, in a good way, also steer away from the most adverse effects.
Right.
And that human-centered approach is something that I think we can bring with us.
Yeah, but agree. I wanna highlight what you said about transparency, because we go from black boxes to glass organizations, right? AI is a black box, and then we want to report or be as transparent as possible. And the ESG is about that. ESG reporting is pushing organizations to report the E in the SDG, but still it's not a frictionless highway yet. But transparency, when it comes to ethical AI and not discriminating, I think we really need to, at this point, start with the metrics. Start, what should we be able to report to create trust? And I mean, in this case, it's the investors driving this, but I think transparency is gonna that is a type of organization that American companies will have to get used to as well. So that's a shift, and that is maybe where we have differences between large American companies and large Swedish companies. Do you want to just short comment on that, Giovanni?
I would say that in not to be specific to IKEA as such, but from my experience, is that whatever is measured, of course, is something that we strive towards. I think the important part is that we measure things of relevance, that we put the reference of what is good to be holistic. And also see that it is the complexity within this area is also to bring forward what is relevant, and also to measure what we see as the complete picture within the areas of sustainability.
Yeah.
And I think that's the journey itself. So the measurement in itself doesn't become the goal, but rather the impact it has going forward. I think there is plenty of room for development within this area, but I think that we are very keen to see that how one can progress it in a good way, because we want to both be part of contributing for good, but also seeing that it becomes a part of a more holistic picture.
Yeah. I agree, but in my opinion, I think we have to hurry. There's a sense of urgency here. I don't know what comes first: the EU regulation, the ESG reporting, or social concern. We have to start reporting and seeing that as a competitive edge. So we're going to take some questions from the audience, and I'm just going to read them. This is to Jörgen. Olivia told us about how smaller companies can actually turn risk mitigation into innovation, and that regulations does not always have to hamper innovation. From a policy perspective, do you think AI regulation can boost competitiveness, the competitive landscape with, for example, new markets, new types of services?
Well, I think that the Commission, when they proposed the AI Act, I think they believe that a legislation will put predictability, and predictability will make sure that we have investments. And this might be true. And I think businesses themselves should answer this. I know that the American answer to this is no, we shall not do regulation. At least not in the European way. We should not do a broad regulation. I've heard a story when Obama was president, and he asked a group of very informed and clever persons on AI to think about how he should regulate AI. And they came back to him and said, Mr. President, you should not regulate AI. You should follow it very closely. And if you should regulate the issues that you see that we have a problem. And I think that seems to be a clever way for me. And I think we might have problems, or I think we do have problems in ethical areas or in privacy areas. So they should be regulated. But what the European Union does now is to regulate everything, basically. And that might... I'm not sure, but it might hamper innovation. And in that sense, in that case, we haven't won anything, basically. Then European companies move to US instead.
We'll see about that. Okay, so thank you, Olivia, Giovanni, and Jörgen. This has been an extremely fruitful discussion where we've shared our perspective, not always aligned, but it doesn't matter because the four of us is here to innovate AI that humans can trust, right? So it's all about creating trust and to lead artificial intelligence in the right way, embracing it responsibly. I want to thank you all for watching this digital online roundtable. The ESG, the upcoming EU regulation and social concern, it's not going to go away. It's going to be on the top of our agenda, and we need to get prepared. I so much appreciate being part of a movement for withholding human rights in the digital environment. Thank you all and have a great evening.